Spencer Lindquist is on to talk about his article, The Left Has a Pedophilia Problem and It's Out in the Open. Is the left coming for your children? Should you be worried? And what can you do about it? All this coming up now.
The headline says, The Left Has a Pedophilia Problem and It's Out in the Open. And it's something we've talked about many times on this program. Good morning to you, Mr. Lindquist.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, praise be to God. Like I said, I would love to say your article was such a joy to read, but it really was difficult to get through because of the nature of the topic. Why don't you take us through it?
So this topic, it really is one that is quite gut-wrenching. And this article, it really details a variety of different instances in which the left is pushing pedophilia. And this is something that we're seeing from, I list one example from a gentleman named Joe Fischel. He's a Yale professor, and he talks about the nudity that he believes children should be exposed to at pride parades. And then there's also that that movie Cuties from Netflix, which a grand jury in Texas actually indicted as child porn. And there's several other examples. There's Drag Queen Story Hour, which has been found to be hosting convicted sex criminals with large groups of children. So there are several examples, and I go through many more in the article. But it's very clear that there is a concerted push by the left to normalize the sexualization of children.
Yes, I especially really enjoyed your article because I have been talking about this for a while. Every time this comes up, the great case of Jeff Younger just finished up in Texas, where Jeff lost custody of his son James when his mother wants to transition him, and this whole thing keeps going through. And often we bring up the TFP and here, and they're excellent at going to these drag queen story times and protesting them. And it seems as though we go to these events, and I've joined them at a number of these events, and it seems as though so many of the people there are just like, it's no big deal. It's just they're trying to help them become more tolerant. Why is this a real issue that we should really be concerned about?
Well, one of the reasons why it's such a big issue is because of that language of tolerance. And we hear, this is about tolerance and this is about acceptance, but that's not true. It's quite frankly, it's a lie, and it's a way to try and guilt people out of protecting their children. That's what it is. Same for so many of the insults of homophobe or bigot. So many of these slur words that get thrown around. But this is a massive issue because we know that the left is coming after our children on an ideological level. We can see that with critical race theory, which is just this scourge that is in American schools right now. And this issue is the one where it's the most pressing. This is not about making children more tolerant or more accepting. I've spoken with attendees at San Francisco's Pride Parade, and they told me very, very, very clearly that they want to make sure that their sexual habits are normalized so that children accept them, either them or when they're older. So we know what they're doing, and to obscure it with rhetoric about tolerance or acceptance or diversity is really sickening.
Yeah, the homosexualist made that video that went viral that they had to delete of the gay men's choir singing how they're coming after your children. And people are like, oh, it's just a satire. But I think that whenever the homosexualists tell us their agenda, when our enemies tell us what they want, we should probably believe them.
Exactly. I mean, they came out and said, we are coming for your children. And one of the lyrics of the song was something to the effect of, you're concerned that we're going to corrupt your kids, and justice wants you're correct. So it can't get any more clear than that. It cannot get any more blatant than that. And also the people who wrote this song, there's two of them, and they actually had previously written a play about bachabazi. And I won't go into detail here because it is quite a disgusting practice. But bachabazi translates to boy play, and it is a practice in some parts of the Middle East where young boys are groomed to be dancers, and unfortunately they do more than just dance, and they're essentially owned by older men. And they wrote an entire play about this, and it wasn't really a critique of it either. The New York Times called it out as pedophilic. So when they come out and when they tell us what they're doing, we have to listen and we have to fight back.
Spencer Lindquist is our guest. He is, as I said, a senior at Pepperdine. He's also an intern at the Federalist. And the article, which we will link to, the headline goes, "The left has a pedophilia problem and it's out in the open." It is a difficult thing to talk about. One that we have discussed many times on the program. For instance, I think it was maybe 3 months ago, 2.5 months, something like that. There was an article that listed all of these cartoons that embrace transgenderism or homosexual ideologies, just being perpetrated upon our youngest in society. Why do you think they are no longer trying to hide anything? They just seem like totally emboldened to just come on out with their agenda. What say you, Spencer Lindquist?
Well, let's say that's a two-part problem. For starters, I think so many of them are just so much more bold. They think that they can get away with anything, right? Because if they can come after your children, what can't they do? And the second aspect of it is, I think that these are humiliation rituals, because they understand that children are the most precious and important aspects of our society. That's one of the reasons why they push abortion so hard. They know that if they can come after the most innocent, the most guiltless among us, that they've got free reign in our society, and that if we won't stand up and protect our kids, what is it that we will protect?
Wow. I've always been bothered by the sexualization of children, whether it was hetero or homosexual, to be honest with you. I mean, when I hate to admit this, but remember when twerking was like becoming popular, and there's these videos all over the social media, whether you wanted them or not, they'd be there in your face of kids imitating this dance, this practice, because they see adults doing it. And I think that's part of the danger, especially if you see photos or pictures or videos of these pride parades, and you see people bringing their kids there, and there are grown men acting like animals on leashes, and other perversities. And it just boggles the mind how any adult might think that this is okay. And yet in your article, you point out that Flora Gill, writing for GQ, even she is advocating for pornography custom for either teens or even younger. What's this about?
Well, this is disgusting, and this was another example where we just have to hear what they're saying and realize that this is what they mean. There's no way to make excuses for any of this. But that's right. She called for the creation of porn that would be marketed towards children and towards young teens. Absolutely disgusting, inexcusable. And this is just one of these cases where we're seeing that their ideology has no limiting principle. There is no time that will come when it's okay, we're tolerant enough, or we're accepting enough, or we are diverse enough. That day will never come. There is no limiting principle internal to their ideology. So the only way any of this will be limited is if parents and people and Christians and Catholics and conservatives more broadly, if we all just say that we're not going to accept this. And if there is any use for cancel culture in our society, is to cancel people who are endangering children. And these are cases where social shaming is absolutely entirely necessary.
Amen. Yeah, that's very important. This whole idea, we've kind of gathered this idea that shame is bad, guilt is bad. We have to get rid of all guilt and shame. But those are actually tools that are used to create a cohesion in a society. And guilt is a recognition that you've done something wrong. And with these people, they feel guilt for a lot of their wicked things. And so what do they have to do? They need to destroy the conscience of themselves and of others in order that they can get rid of their guilt and get rid of their shame. And they do this in a brilliant way. Could you speak about how the left tries to, they put these crazy things out in the open, and then once people start commenting on it, they respond, oh, but why do you care so much? This is a private thing that's happening. Could you speak about how they try to manipulate people's consciences?
Well, one of the biggest ways they try and manipulate people's conscience, and this is what they do on this issue and so many others, is that instead of calling you wrong, instead of saying that what you're seeing isn't happening, they just say, oh, you're a bigot for noticing, you're a homophobe for noticing. And they've got several other slurs that they default to depending on the issue. But this is just, so long as we are tied into their moral framework where tolerance is the be-all, end-all, and there's nothing that can supersede it, then we will lose on these fronts, because tolerance in and of itself is not a virtue. It depends on what you're tolerating. It's entirely dependent on what you're tolerating. And if we're tolerating, like you said, the sexualization of children on social media, that's something that's rampant on TikTok right now for sure, and on other social media platforms as well. If we tolerate movies like Cuties that has children twerking, and that is, it has been indicted as child pornography, if we accept and if we're tolerant of people who sing about corrupting your children and they mock you for wanting to defend your children, that's tolerance of any of those things is not a virtue. Tolerance there is spinelessness.
Absolutely. Fulton Sheen, back in 1931, he was Monsignor Fulton Sheen at the time. He said, America, it is said, is suffering from intolerance. It is not. It is suffering from tolerance. Tolerance of right and wrong, truth and error, virtue and evil, Christ and chaos. Our country is not nearly so overrun with the bigoted as it is overrun with the broad-minded. And he has this whole essay on this exact topic. And absolutely, we have this strange idea that tolerance is a virtue. And in a sense, it can be, but we are not struggling with having too much tolerance in America. We're having or not enough tolerance. We're struggling with having way too much.
We have about 2 minutes left in our conversation with Spencer Lindquist. What's the extent of the mainstream's participation in this? What kind of outlets are we talking about that seem to be supporting this agenda?
There's a wide array of outlets. I mentioned earlier that there was a Yale professor who was advocating for children to be shown nudity, indecent exposure at pride parades. This is, one of the premier institutions, not only in America, but in the world. And there are several other mainstream institutions that are pushing this as well. Of course, we previously discussed GQ, the writer from GQ, so there needs to be porn for children. Snapchat, the app Snapchat, had a love has no age filter during what they call Pride Month.
Wow.
The New York Times referred to a 13-year-old homeless child in an article that they wrote as somebody who was trading sex. They said that she was being trained by a group of transgender adults. This is not trading sex. Sex is not something to be traded. This was the grooming and rape of children. There was also a Washington Post article that advocated for children to be exposed to kink at pride parades. So these are mainstream institutions. Netflix is another. This is no small problem. This is a problem from the mainstream institutions of our society. It's an elite push on the American people.
If you like that interview, then be sure to check out some of our other interviews that you might find fascinating. And don't forget to like and subscribe and share this interview with someone that you think will find this informative and inspiring. God love you.